Vitamin B12 has one of the most ridiculous journeys in the human body. You need stomach acid, enzymes, a very specific door, 2 bodyguards, all just to get into your blood. Odysseus took 10 years to get home. B12 looked at that and said, "I've been doing this since you were born, Odysseus. I've been doing this before you existed, Homer." Why is B12 so special? B12 is a big vitamin, and so it's a lot more sensitive than other vitamins, and so it needs to be protective, and the body knows that, and it knows that it needs B12. And if just one part of this journey fails, you could become deficient even if you're eating plenty of B12. Here's why. First step of vitamin B12's Odyssey. It enters your body like Odysseus entered Troy. Hidden. Most of the B12 that you eat is hidden in animal products, dairy, meats, eggs, etc., not in vegetables. So trick number 1 is if you're a vegan, you need to be supplementing with B12. But it's attached to the proteins in the animal products, so the first thing it needs to do is get out. Get out of the Trojan horse. When that food reaches your stomach, B12 has a few friends. The acid in the stomach helps to dissolve the food and is breaking apart the proteins from that B12. It's freeing it up. Also, there's an enzyme called pepsin that also helps to break up that protein and break off the B12. So out pops B12. Odysseus has officially left the Trojan horse. But outside of the Trojan horse, there are people that are trying to attack him, right? He's in the walls of the city, of the stomach, and the stomach's trying to beat him up. So for B12 to be protected while it's in the stomach, in that harsh environment, our protein binds to B12 and protects it. It shields it. It's a bodyguard. But what produced the R protein? Your salivary glands. So your body's always one step ahead to protect B12. And at the same time, there's another bodyguard that's floating around over here, but it hasn't attached just yet. It's called Intrinsic Factor, and it's produced by the parietal cells. The true homies. So this R protein is the first ship for B12, or Odysseus, and it's carrying it through the stomach into the duodenum. And the duodenum is where we meet our Cyclops. This is where your pancreas is dumping enzymes to help break down food products. Among them are proteases. Proteases break down proteins. Haptocorin, R protein, is a protein. That's B12's first boat. These proteases absolutely wreck shop and just destroy his first ship right off the bat. He's so happy. Yay, I got my ship. Just gone. Done. No more R protein. So B12 is free again. That sounds terrible, but actually this Cyclops is helpful. B12 needs to be rid of R protein before it meets the most important guardian. So it needs to be rid of its first guardian to meet its second guardian, Athena, otherwise known as Intrinsic Factor. It was created by the stomach. It was following R protein and B12, maybe a little bit jelly, a little jealousy right there. But it was faithful, always following B12, waiting for it to be released by the Cyclops, the pancreatic proteases. Immediately whenever it's released, it seizes the opportunity, swings in there, snatches up our hero, B12, and is now its protector. Because B12 is sensitive, and it also ticked off Poseidon, apparently, and it needs something to help it and watch over it. And B12's destination is 20 feet, literally 20 feet away. And relatively speaking, that's an incredibly far distance for our little teeny tiny B12 to go 20 feet down the small intestines all the way to the terminal ileum is where it's going. But it has some barriers before it gets there. Now, what could hurt our fearless B12? A lot could hurt our fearless B12. First is Circe, Metformin. The witch, the drug. This is something that if you're taking metformin or you know somebody who's taking metformin for diabetes, you should actually be very aware of this. If your PCP doesn't talk to you about it, then you could have a B12 deficiency that's causing severe symptoms. Metformin alters B12 absorption through like calcium-dependent absorption. And if you take it for a long enough time, then you might actually start to have some side effects from that. I had a patient who was having these severe symptoms of like dizziness and imbalance. It just felt like they were off kilter all the time. And I said, "You've taken metformin, right? How long have you taken it for?" And they said 20 years. And I said, "Has anybody ever tested your B12? And they said, "No." It was the first time I'd seen them. And I said, I'm about to change your life. The next encounter are the Sirens, singing everything that you want, but you can never have. And I'm talking gastric sleeve, as in you want all this food if you have a gastric sleeve, but you can't have it anymore because you just can't tolerate it, because you can't eat that much, because your stomach is that big now. What happens with the gastric sleeve is they cut out a large portion of the stomach to help people eat less. And if you're cutting out that large portion of the stomach, then you might not be able to create all of that intrinsic factor like we were talking about, and that'll decrease your absorption. Scylla, or pernicious anemia. This is one of the tricksters. This is the one that I saw, and they had nausea and vomiting. They were super anemic. We gave B12, and then they were like, oh, I'm totally good now. I'm ready to go home. And we were like, are you sure? That's insane. There's an autoimmune component that's attacking the parietal cells that are producing the intrinsic factor. And if those are all attacked, they're not producing the intrinsic factor. It's not protecting B12, and then it doesn't get absorbed. Charybdis, that big old sucker. This is whenever something might be wrong with the final destination, maybe due to Crohn's disease, because that's eating out the holes in all of the areas of the intestines. So maybe you have a B12 deficiency issue with Crohn's. And Calypso, that whippersnapper, she held Odysseus for 7 years. And just like Calypso, maybe if we're suppressing acid production for 7 years, like you're taking a proton pump inhibitor and suppressing acid for a long time, it's not able to help release B12 from the protein, like we were talking about. You could have a B12 deficiency. Eventually, though, Odysseus sees Ithaca, the ileum, the terminal ileum, the last part of your small intestine before the large intestine. B12 has made it home. But what happens in the Odyssey? Athena helps Odysseus by disguising him, making him a beggar so that he can enter into his homeland, Ithaca. I love that word, Ithaca. And just as Athena helps Odysseus, may our intrinsic factor do the same for our B12. On the surface of our intestinal cells, in the terminal ileum, there's a receptor called QBAM, and that recognizes the intrinsic factor and the B12 complex. And it says, come on in, sit on down, tell me about yourself. So intrinsic factor isn't just transportation and protection, it's also the key to getting in to the homeland. No intrinsic factor, no injury. We're inside of the cells in the terminal ileum, but we are still not inside of the blood. So B12 is released from intrinsic factor in the cell, and it's just chilling by itself until it's reunited with his bow. Transcobalamin 2. I had to think about it for a second. So with his bow, B12 is able to prove himself, and he finally is able to enter into the bloodstream and then be transported to the body, where it does a lot of other really cool functions. And plot twist, you can bypass all of this if you just do a little bit of a sublingual B12, or if you take a high enough dose of B12, but talk to your doctor before doing any of that. Most people are fine, okay? But it's just like the Odyssey. This is just so good. This is so perfect. I can't handle it. Please appreciate it. If Odysseus didn't go the fun way where he encountered all of that bleh mess of an adventure, and he just used B12 sublingually, bypassed everything, went straight home to Ithaca, had a grand old time. Anyways, you're cool and your body is really cool, and especially the way it absorbs B12. Remember that, please, next time that you watch The Odyssey. Peace.